Welcome to the Silent Thinking Podcast, a space to slow down, breathe, and reconnect. Today I'm reading from When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister by Dave Roberts and Patty Furino. Just listen and let the stillness support you. Chapter 8: The Stories That Define Us. I have come to believe in the importance of storytelling to help address and provide clarity during life challenges. Working together with Pat, I was able to revisit different times in my life and discover a new narrative. We encourage people to tell their stories. It is helpful to find individuals and/or communities that are willing to bear witness, support, and validate your experiences to discover its importance in your lives. Through our personal stories, we can discover a new understanding of the past while creating the present that we desire. This understanding can empower our young adults to embrace the yin and yang of who they are. Do we wish to renounce our shadow, or do we want to walk with it, acknowledging it has much to teach us? Our shadow side can serve us by helping us decide how we choose to experience life. Embracing our shadow makes our life stories more complete. Thus far, you read about the serendipity that Patty and I experienced, leading to our unlikely meeting and the incredible experience that she facilitated. We have shared moments from our lives that have shaped our personal stories. Before I met Pat, my life story was focused on talking about every detail of Jeannine's illness and death when sharing memories of her life on Earth. After I met Patty, I was able to integrate psychology with spirituality to create a new perspective after tragedy. In the process of sharing my story, I was able to broaden my perspectives and connect to something greater than myself. Embracing the multidimensional world of spirituality, my story now acknowledges Jeannine's eternal life, as well as her ongoing presence and influence in mine. My story was no longer focused solely on her physical life and death. I discovered wisdom by expanding my beliefs, allowing my story to evolve. Storytelling is not a novel concept. In fact, Pat explained that storytelling is one of the oldest traditions known to humankind. In many cultures, traditions and values were passed on strictly through oral storytelling. How many of us have sat with a grandparent or an elder from our families, listening to the challenges and pains that they experienced? How do we respond? Are we present for their stories? Do we empathize? Do we take on their pain and frustration as part of our burden? Do we take the time to validate the importance of their experience? My grandmother was the first person to demonstrate how powerful our stories can be. My maternal grandmother, Bridget, was the elder matriarch of our family and keeper of our family stories. She immigrated to this country as a very young woman and found a job in a local textile mill in our area. Her husband and my paternal grandfather died before I was born. Her work ethic was evident, and her love for her family knew no bounds. One of the great memories of my childhood was going to my grandmother's house after school while my mother was working. Without fail, there would be a tall glass of milk and a warm loaf of pita bread swimming in butter. One afternoon, after I came home from school, I asked my grandmother about the old country, as she liked to call the place of her birth before she came to America. My grandmother described the sights and sounds of her homeland in detail. Though I have never been to Lebanon, I could almost picture the beauty and splendor of the country that she left behind. I could feel her pain as she described her magnificent country being ravaged by war. My grandmother became concerned about the war in the Middle East because much of her family was still in Lebanon. Some of our relatives had already immigrated to start a new life in America. I could sense her frustration and powerlessness over not being able to do more to bring her remaining family to the United States. The yin and yang of her life in Lebanon was abundantly clear. When she died of complications from congestive heart failure, I was only 14. Our family was never the same and not as cohesive when she was alive. Could it have been because no one else in my family assumed the role of storyteller? We can look at our ancestry and how it impacts our lives in the present. Honoring our ancestral past through memory recognition, regression hypnosis, or just through plain empathy allows us to examine someone's story through their eyes. It is not important to understand it or judge it, but to honor what parts of their past influence their present. Pat was instrumental in helping me realize I have the choice to interpret experiences from my life, enabling me to find new strength in myself and ultimately finding peace in the new narrative of my story. For me, that is what psychology was always supposed to be about. Finding peace with your life story in spite of the challenges you've endured. This way, Pat would describe how she visualized my story was an epiphany. She commented on how she envisioned my personal book of life on a bookshelf alongside other people she assisted. When working with me, she would remove the book from her mental library and read the chapters of my life. She wasn't there to judge, just to observe. It was reminiscent of my experience as a counselor. As an addictions counselor for the state of New York for 27 years, I worked with chemically dependent individuals from all walks of life, all with unique stories to share. Many of them were creative, intelligent, loving, and passionate individuals who danced with addiction. Before fully understanding the individual challenges they brought to the treatment setting, I needed to establish myself as a listener, allowing their stories to unfold. In order for this to occur, I needed to create a non-judgmental environment where they felt safe and secure. Allowing their stories to unfold helped me understand their addiction was what they did, it wasn't who they were. Through their stories, I discovered they often had prolonged periods of sobriety where they used their challenges with addiction to help others. When I shared these observations with Patty, she offered a different viewpoint. She asked if it is possible that individuals dealing with addiction see the world from a multidimensional perspective just like her, saying when they become grounded in the experience of their physical life, there may be too much information running through their heads. To quiet the speed of their thoughts and visions, they turn to alcohol and other drugs. We discussed the possibility that individuals could be trying to self-medicate to simply slow their minds. Eventually, they became dependent on their drug of choice, which prevented them from embracing their authentic selves. She wondered if the individuals that I work with had prior experiences of a spiritual nature. Upon further reflection, I realized there were actually several occasions when unexplained experiences manifested during individual sessions. Those stories could be the subject of a whole other book. Patty and I had conversations about individuals whom she encountered through her ministry that effectively manage their addictions by connecting to spirit in some way, shape, or form. During one of these discussions, a client whom I felt a deep connection with came to mind. In the 1890s, I worked with an intelligent and intuitive female whom I will call Jay. She had an extensive history of substance abuse treatment and multiple relapse episodes. Traditional chemical dependency treatment, for example, group therapy, communication skills training, relapse prevention education, did not help Jay achieve long-term sobriety. During one of our first meetings, she told me of her strong connection to Native American traditions and wanted to embrace an aftercare treatment setting that utilized these principles. Her commitment and passion embracing this path in her recovery was clearly evident. Jay requested referral to a long-term residential facility that integrated Native American traditions throughout their treatment program. Acceptance into the program requires you to have 50% Native American ancestry, as well as written proof of tribal affiliation. Jay told me that she had very little Native blood, which hindered obtaining the necessary documentation. Because she had so genuinely embraced her Native American ancestry, I wrote an extensive letter advocating for her admission to their facility. She was accepted and successfully completed treatment. Shortly thereafter, I received a letter from Jay. She was sober, active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and gainfully employed. The following passage from her letter reflects her appreciation for being referred to the Native American treatment program. Her words touch my heart to this day. You saw that I needed something different, away from the usual rehab environment, something that I'd grasp and keep. Thank you so much for everything. Niaven, thank you in Mohawk. Reflecting on Patty's observation, I realized that Jay made me aware of the importance of recognizing cultural traditions and spiritual preferences as an essential part of life stories or narratives. Jay was one of the first people who told me the importance of respecting a person's unique needs, even if I could not readily identify with them. How does one integrate their multidimensional view of the world and create their own unique life stories? I have been a close witness, support, and friend to Pat, observing how she uses her connection to manage several categories in her life simultaneously. To the casual observer, Pat may appear to be scattered. In fact, she playfully teases me that the way she attends to the categories in her life is reminiscent of a person with ADHD. From my perspective, Patty's brain operates on what I call spirit time. And because of that, she is able to process many categories or levels of thought simultaneously. Because of the speed which she is able to express her thoughts, our marathon 3 to 4 hour conversations always seem much shorter. To most, Patty would look like the simple housewife tending to her flower gardens, living on the corner of Hunter and Whittier Avenue. But sometimes life isn't always what it appears to be. Pat's story is truly unique, and up till now, she has chosen to keep her ministry work private. I felt privileged when she accepted me into her inner circle. I quickly became aware of all the categories God was calling on her to fulfill. Early on in our friendship, Patty described a vision she had back in 2005. It was the need to better prepare Long Island for a catastrophic weather event. She described her determination to convince New York State elected officials to embrace a comprehensive vision plan she composed for a recreational center designed and built for people with disabilities. Patty's vision also includes ideas for a quick transformation, allowing the center to efficiently be utilized as a central point for disaster operations on Long Island. I witnessed her unbridled passion as she devoted a great deal of time and energy researching and validating the need for such a multifaceted facility. She spent her free time in meetings with the Office for People with Disabilities, emergency management personnel, and political leaders, trying to persuade them that a facility of this nature was needed. She shared her comprehensive vision plan outlining the purpose and scope of the center. Patty demonstrated how the proposed center could effectively serve the needs of Long Island residents in the event a major disaster cut off all established routes for transporting goods and services to and from the island. She started researching this plan in 2006 and saw firsthand how it could effectively be used during Hurricane Irene and Superstorm Sandy. She volunteered many hours as the American Red Cross liaison in Suffolk County, Long Island's Emergency Operations Center. Her plan was never fully embraced, but she is still hopeful and has faith that one day it will be implemented. Patty began volunteering with the American Red Cross in September 2010 to gain a better understanding of disaster operations for her vision for the center. Subsequently, she deployed to Greenwood, Mississippi to help set up a shelter as a proactive measure to address the potential flooding of the Mississippi River. While there, she ended up attending the unveiling of the first marker on the Mississippi Freedom Trail in Money, Mississippi. When Pat shared her experience at this event, I reminded her that the Mississippi Freedom Trail ceremony was inextricably connected to her experience at the NMAI in Virginia, which we described in Chapter 6, 3 months prior to her deployment to Mississippi on May 18, 2011. Patty's life always had some form of serendipity. She would excitedly express her amazement at the way God was directing her life. As for me, I was in awe of Pat's seemingly random experiences and how they were intertwined and connected. In her spare time, she would answer the call to offer spiritual counseling as the minister coordinator for the Long Island Angel of Hope statue, a position she held for several years. Pat's mission was to support parents like myself who experienced the death of a child. She used her awareness in unique and subtle ways to affect the lives of parents during life challenges. As part of her responsibilities, Patty wrote ceremonies for the bereaved parents who gathered to honor the lives of their children during the December holiday season and Mother's Day weekend. Patty related how she identified intensely with the emotions of those parents who crossed her path. She often described how the emotions they experienced frequently became her own, and the intensity of energy from children's spirits overwhelmed her during these ceremonies. Patty shared with me that she was always emotionally drained after meeting with grieving parents and felt the need to step back from this work. As you can see, no single category defines Pat's truly unique life story. Because of our mutual trust, we were able to witness each other's stories without hesitation or reservation. One of the things Pat and I also share is being privy to the stories of many individuals who have experienced life challenges of all kinds. It is important to emphasize the caregivers of the world need to have a place to share their stories as well. You have gotten a glimpse of our stories in previous chapters. We expanded on our life narratives in more detail so you can get a better idea of who we are and what has shaped the perspectives we have developed through our friendship. In sharing those experiences, you get to know us more intimately. Our individual stories, just as yours, are far from being completely written. We believe, as long as we live and commit to ongoing learning and awareness, chapters of our stories will continue to be written. There is a great responsibility that comes with being present for another's story. Telling our stories about any aspect of our existence can lead to a very intimate and inspiring connection with another human being. Being truly present for another's story is a gift that can direct greater life purpose for ourselves and inspire that individual to find his/her clarity as well. This is exactly what Pat and I feel we did for each other. Sharing intimate and sometimes uncomfortable details of our lives allowed us both to not only become comfortably vulnerable, but to unconditionally trust the counsel we shared with each other. If you are fortunate enough to be the recipient of an individual story, embrace your role as a genuine, trusting, and compassionate presence in that person's eye. Pat describes it as a way to create your soul family. My synonym for soul family is simply a brother or sister from another mother. Pat and I discussed the importance of reserving the right to share our stories when we see fit. She has been extremely guarded most of her life about her level of awareness, a fear she carried from her childhood. On the other hand, I don't always share my story of loss in every setting. For example, I don't discuss my loss history with students in my psychology classes because it isn't relevant to what they need to learn. I don't believe that my story of loss will assist them in achieving their academic goals. However, my death, dying, and bereavement class is different. I openly share with my students my loss history, including the death of my daughter. Death is a very personal topic, one that has affected all of us varying degrees. One of my objectives for the course is for my students to become more comfortable talking about death. I believe that sharing my story makes it easier for them to do so. More often than not, many of my students' personal stories will come out in class through written assignments and one-to-one in-person or virtual conversations. Pat and I feel we all have the right to exercise selective response in any situation. Selective response allows us to empower ourselves, particularly during times when life-altering challenges serve to disempower us. Relationships can develop between individuals who have different perspectives. The most long-lasting and enduring friendships develop because each party brings something to the relationship, promoting growth regardless of ideology. We each take on different roles every day. The roles are usually in response to jobs, people, and various life situations. Pat and I like to share and then examine the multiple roles that play out during the many moments of our lives. The categories that manifest daily create the stories that ultimately define us. Depending on what happens in our lives and the world around us, our stories can change radically. How we respond to those changes now becomes part of the stories that define us. Recognizing the totality of who we are after these changes occur helps us shape our character. In 2013, my wife Sherry and I attended a National Compassionate Friends Conference in Boston, Massachusetts. We crossed paths with a mime in Quincy Market. She interacted with the crowds that formed around her by handing out inspirational messages. I recently came across that little piece of paper, looked at the message, and realized how profound it was for the junction in my life. It was also validation of the spiritual path that I was embracing with Pat's guidance, a path that enhanced my life story. On another level, this message can serve as a mantra for helping all of humanity find common ground during an unsettling and divisive time in our history. The message was, now is the time to take a different path. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. If this brought you peace, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video, and share it with someone who might need a little stillness too. Until next time, keep listening inward.